Hi there, this is Doy Santos, and you're on the cusp. Well, the campaign continues to throw many surprises at us. This week, the internal schism within the opposition between Mara Rojas' campaign and Ocho Derecho's team, managed by the vice president, was put on full display. Congressman Edgar Erice confirmed to the public what many had already suspected. Marojas was distancing himself from the party, as its obstructionist Dilawan brand was deemed too toxic. It was an acknowledgement that taking on Duterte mano a mano only results in your own brand being sullied, while Duterte's standing remains unaffected. Ito yung natutunan ni Mar Rojas when he ran for president against Duterte back in 2016. Sinubukan niya talagang makipagbakbakan kay Duterte, no? Kaso lang, yung rating niya ang medyo sumablay. Yung kay Duterte, yung medyo umangat. The more you try to throw mud at Duterte, the more you get down in the dirt and start muckraking with him, the dirtier you get, while everything just slips off his Teflon skin, it seems. And so Erice, according to a news report released by Rappler, said that Rojas was now disowning yung dilawang name tag niya by saying that it was a conscious decision, sabi ni Erice, to change colors because one mistake that Rojas made in 2016 was acting like Robin. Yung si Robin sa Batman and Robin was acting like Robin to Aquino's Batman, and Robin will never be like Batman. To which Chris Aquino, in her Instagram account, reportedly replied, "You lost, not because of Batman. You lost because you were no match for Iron Man," in an apparent reference to Duterte. And she later compared Special Assistant to the President Bongo to Thor. And every comic fan out there groaned in collective disbelief, right? Because of the apparent mismatch in comic book universes. Batman and Robin belong to DC Comics, while Iron Man and Thor are Marvel superheroes. How are they supposed to meet, right? So that's how the week has been, no? So as the home stretch nears, the final pitch of the opposition for why we should vote for their slate seems to be that we need an independent Senate that will block Duterte's authoritarian tendencies and prevent a coalition that would amend the 1987 Constitution. I've seen Bam Aquino tweet about this. There's this new group called the People's Choice Movement, formed out of faith-based organizations that have endorsed 10 candidates comprised of Ocho Derecho, Grace Po, and Neri Colmenares of Makabayan. And they've been supported by the Catholic bishops of the Philippines. Manila Auxiliary Bishop Broderick Pabilio, who's the chairman of the Catholic Bishops Conference of the Philippines, Episcopal Commission on the Laity, has said now is the task for all the lay faithful to campaign the deserving candidates so as to counter the money and the political machineries that traditional politicians are using. It seems that these church groups, comprised of Catholic, Protestant lay people, and evangelical lay people, them and the clergy now seem to be wanting to substitute one form of authoritarianism for another, right? Duterte's secular form of autocracy for a theocratic form of dictatorship, right? If this is not a blatant violation of the separation of church and state, I don't know what is. Secondly, in this era of extreme polarization where either side is growing in its militancy, you have the Cadi Diaz forces and the Dilawans squaring off, unable to have a civil conversation with each other on anything. In this situation, what we need are bridge builders in the Senate, not road blockers, to dialogue. Bridge builders, not road blockers. What do I mean by this? In political philosophy, There's a thing called moral conflicts. What is a moral conflict? A moral conflict occurs when two groups have been socialized into different moral codes and draw meaning based on opposing worldviews. When this happens, it's difficult to break the pattern of enmity between them. So, for example, the KDDS crowd, right? And the liberal Dilawan crowd, right? These two crowds have been they almost belong to two different planets, if not two different universes, no? Just like the DC and Marvel comics universes. They can't even have a common set of vocabulary with which to conduct any form of civic or civil discourse with each other, you know? They just belong to two different planes. Kung KDDS ka, ano, um, walang pagkakasundo. Wala kayong mapagkakasunduan sa mga dilawan, 'di ba? And vice versa. They treat each other as evil, as the personification of everything that is wrong with our society. And you know, yung yung pagkapanalo ni Duterte noong 2016, that only exposed, right, the deep divisions that were already there, between people who were just so sick and tired of the ineffectual nature, right, of these pro-democratic, pro-human rights types in government, and just wanted like government to get on with the job instead of this kind of sense that they were getting that, oh, you should be grateful that we're in power because kami yung mga disente. Di ba? Wala na kaming kailangang gawin. Yan. There was this attitude of holier than thou. On the flip side, the people from the Dilawan crowd, the liberal voters, see Duterte as the personification of the devil, basically. He wants to restore, the Marcosian era of dictatorship in our country. He tramples on people, he kills them without giving them due process. And so he must be resisted and at all costs. So there's a rift in our society that's been exposed. So there is this opposition, there is this moral conflict happening in our society today. The election of Duterte in 2016 merely exposed the deep moral divide that existed in Philippine society. At this point, the cleavage between KDDS and anti-Duterte Dilawans is growing. So what's needed now, in my view, are leaders who can reconcile these disparate groups and bridge the different moral orders together. We do need independent critical thinkers who can speak their mind and speak truth to power. But at the same time, they should be able to engage constructively to improve proposed measures made by the Malacanang to get things done. Not people who will simply oppose and seek to wreck the place because Duterte is evil in their minds. I would even cite the case of the late Senator Ninoy Aquino. He was for reconciliation with Marcos when he returned from his furlough in the US back in 1983. Ninoy Aquino was firmly of the belief that what the opposition needed to do was work with Marcos to arrive at a power sharing agreement, to effect a smooth transition of power, to prevent a situation where Marcos's death would bring about chaos and disruption and instability. So when he returned home, he was actually extending an olive branch to Marcos and saying, hey, you jailed me for 7.5 years. You made me suffer, you put me in solitary confinement because, and You've been in power all this time. Pero, alam mo, kalimutan na natin lahat yon. All I want to do now is ensure that the country is not plunged into chaos when you leave. Yun yung ano niya eh. He mentioned this in his speeches while before returning. Ano? It's not really talked about now. But he was offering Marcos a way out. If you voluntarily see the writing on the wall, he would say, tignan mo na yan, malapit na ang katapusan mo. Ano? Bago magwakas ang termino mo, ang panahon mo dito bilang presidente, have the wisdom to see the writing on the wall and step down voluntarily. Just as what Mahathir later did, and the way that Lee Kuan Yew later decided to do. They voluntarily stepped down and paved the way for successors to take their place. So Ninoy was not actually trying to depose Marcos unconstitutionally. No, the reason why he came home in 83 was because in 84 there was going to be a Batasan Pambansa elections. And he was planning to run and lead the opposition. And the opposition he was offering to enter into a power sharing agreement with the ruling party, KBL, and say, President Marcos, you become president, I'll become prime minister, and let's work together. And then eventually, when it's your time to let go of the reins, we can have an election and settle it, and then we can effect a smooth transition of power. Why did Ninoy take this stand? He said it himself. He said, if Mr. Marcos is part of the problem, then he should also be part of the solution. So rather than trying to unseat him through revolutions or extra constitutional or even violent means, what Ninoy was trying to do was head off the communist rebellion and extend the olive branch and work out a grand bargain between the ruling party and the opposition before it was too late. There was no sense of vindictiveness in him. And so this is how you disarm a dictator and win over followers to your side. When the Filipino people saw how Ninoy was gunned down on the tarmac of Manila International Airport on August 21, 1983, after seeking to build bridges with Ferdinand Marcos, they switched over to the opposition side. Where are the Ninoys of today? That is my question. Where are those opposition members who are willing to extend the olive branch to Duterte and say, Mr. Duterte, we know how brutal you have been in your war against drugs, but let us work together and find commonality. Let's work together to ensure that the ultimate goal that you're after of ridding the country of drugs can succeed, while at the same time preserving the rights of ordinary citizens. Let's look at reforms that will strengthen the capacity of our government to prosecute criminals, drug syndicates, drug pushers. Let's forget about all this rubbish about, demonizing you, about vilifying you before the foreign media, before foreign audiences. Forget about that. Let's bury all that. Let's work together. Etong panukalang batas para palakasin ang PDEA, kunwari. Etong panukalang batas, no? Para palakasin din ang karapatan ng mga inaakusa, no? Na maprotektahan nila, magarantiya rin nila ang karapatan nila sa isang trial na hindi naman sila agrabyado, ano. Let's work together to find commonality, in other words, to bring about that vision of a drug-free Philippines. Nasaan yung mga ganun ngayon? Wala sila, no? There is none of that going on from the opposition side. Instead, they're saying, we must make a stand, we must oppose, we must tear down this government. But instead of zealots, what we need are sensible, reasonable, pragmatic people who will build bridges to reconcile the seemingly irreconcilable strands of our political culture at the moment. The illiberal but democratically popular on the one hand, and the liberal, unpopular elitists on the other. This is what's needed to reform our country so that we can form a more modern, more liberal democratic state. Rather than burning everything to the ground, rather than further polarization, what we need are leaders who will build and renovate our current system and modernize it so that we can then develop and mature as a nation, both economically and politically. This has been another edition of The Cusp. Thank you for listening. You can catch all our previous episodes on cusp-ph.blogspot.com. You can send us your questions through Twitter at cusp_ph and through Facebook at cusph. Really would love to hear from you. This has been Doy Santos, hoping to see you next time on another edition of The Cusp.